going to pass you over to Simon. If you're feeling brave, turn your cameras on, because it's much easier to talk to people you can see than to talk to little blank screens. That would be lovely. And for asking questions, type it in the chat, or if you can turn your camera and your microphone on, that'd be great. Hello, Teresa. Thank you very much. Hi, Yu Yang. We've got those, and we've got Emma. Thanks, Emma. So yeah, we've got some brave students here. So fantastic. So I'm going to pass over to Simon to tell you all about what he does. So thank you very much for coming, Simon.
Thank you. So my name's Simon. I'm originally from the UK. I've been in Malaysia about 20 years, and I've been very lucky. I've lived and worked on 5 continents, so Africa and Latin America, spent quite a long time in China. You know, I think that one of the things that this area can do is take you all around the world. You know, this is a global industry. It's not limited to any country, and the reason why this is a discussion is because it's such a broad industry. You can have farming, you can have water, you can have power, which are the 3 big pillars of life. Anything connected to those, it can be human, it can be geography. And so, you know, I think there's very little point in me presenting for half an hour. I think it's actually better that you guide, and we've got some questions which are very useful. Anyway, so I've got a degree in tropical agriculture, basically. I spent a long time in the big bad tobacco industry. We were at one stage the 2nd biggest planter of trees in the world, which not many people know, and focusing a lot on food crops. And since leaving the industry, I've really specialized in food and I guess rural development and renewable energy with the 3 companies we have here in Malaysia for about the last 10 years. So that's a little bit of a background. I don't bite, you know, please feel free to ask anything you like. I spend most of my time with people, generally on the East Coast. So hopefully I'm pretty approachable. I was just going to say a few words about COVID and how it's affected us. I was just telling Ruth, I've actually just got off a plane because agriculture, food, these sort of industries are seen as essential. And we've been able, fortunately, to travel throughout, other than about the first 2 weeks a year ago. We've remained largely unaffected in terms of an industry. Yeah, you know, we've had problems with supply chains like everybody else. So one of the things I was mentioning to Ruth is that you may not have noticed, but we ran out of onions because India supplies most of Malaysia's onions and the supply chain got interrupted. We don't grow our own onions because it's not the right climate. So we ran out for about 2 months last year. And then I don't know, people haven't realized, but for a while we were buying English onions, right? Which is slightly ridiculous. And then we've moved to New Zealand onions, I think now. And whilst onions might seem a really odd topic, right? It's pretty much a staple food, if you think about it. It goes in a lot of things. And so it's a good example of where, whilst an industry has been largely unaffected, the supply chains around that industry have been very affected, right? And, you know, this brings up the subject. I think many people know the term food security, right? But I'm not sure many people understand the term food sovereignty, which is having the ownership of your own food, right? And so onions is an example of an overseas supply chain. An example of a domestic supply chain is the needs of the city dragging fresh food from the countryside because they have less employment opportunities, there's less tourism, etc., right? So they can get higher prices, so they sell all their food to the city, but that means that they eat frozen chicken chop, right? And frozen fish, which is what I've been doing all week. And so, you know, the story behind COVID is one of success, but also one of great learning for the sustainable industries. And what, you know, it's a little bit difficult to talk about benefiting from such a disaster, right? You know, it's quite embarrassing in a way, but you know, one would have to say that, you know, agriculture, a lot of sustainability has benefited hugely. So I'll give you an example. In the early days last year, sort of this time last year, we were on 50% staffing in the field, so essential work only, which meant things like land drain stuff didn't get looked after, right? And, you know, about 2 or 3 months later, we go and look at them and they're completely different. You know, nature has sent them a completely different way, right? They're no longer straight. And it's almost like nature took an opportunity to teach us how to do it properly, because they work much better and we've left them alone. And it wasn't what we were taught at college. And so, you know, the year's been a good one for the return of nature in general. I guess balanced out now by the waste caused by PPE and masks, but we'll deal with that at some point. Nature has returned to a large degree. It's fought back, and it shows you how resilient this is. So that's a little bit of a background. We can cover any aspects. We can do agriculture. Water is very key in these communities, as it is in the city. Power. We can talk about urban agriculture, if people like human geography, rural development. Any economics students there might want to talk about economic multiplier effects of rural development. And if I can't answer it, I'll know someone that can, right? Because there's a question later about chemical engineering someone sent through. So I have a few ideas, but I'm not a chemical engineer. So what should I do, Ruth? Should I just go down some?
Yeah, absolutely. If you start with some of the questions that you have already, and right. I'm trying to scroll along looking for anybody's hand up. So if anybody puts their hand up, you can unmute yourselves and ask your question. That would be fantastic, or type questions into the chat.
Okay, so a real interesting one is regarding the economics of sustainability. So it seems that the greening of businesses is not only environmentally, but also economically beneficial, right? You know, what's the biggest factor that deters global companies from urgently making their products more sustainable? So let's take the first bit first, the economics of sustainability. So a very good example. If we have an agricultural chemical that's manufactured, and we have a naturally occurring organic chemical-free alternative, yes, of course, that is good for the environment, right? But in terms of economics, people need less protective equipment. There's less safety risk, right? I don't have any worries, so many worries about storage, right? Often these naturally occurring products can be made. We can grow it on the farm, like neem. People have heard of neem. We grow neem trees, right? And we use neem sort of solution as a anti-insects, right? So, you know, being sustainable is actually really very, you know, I'm not going to say it's more important than the environment, but it's at least as important to the business. Because if it doesn't make economic sense to the business, it's very difficult to try and persuade people to change. And one of the issues with the organic industry is that organic produce is generally more expensive than conventionally grown, which often puts it out of reach of some people's pockets, and therefore the general uptake of the product is held back by the economics of the proposition. So we've essentially gone, so I came through my college, my uni, in the era where we were being taught about agrochemicals, right? So we did a lot about agrochemicals, but the industry's now gone completely the other way. And I would say, for want of a better word, using products and techniques that probably our grandparents learned or their parents learned. There's a whole sea change, and we're using, there'll be a question later, precision agriculture, so farming tech, to help us even more with that. But I'll come on to that a bit later. Deterring global companies, well, it's the economics. Companies are there inevitably to make a profit, and if people won't buy it, they can't sell it, right? And I think I don't know a company that isn't trying to change. I can't think of one. Particularly every FMCG, fast-moving consumer good industry that we would be able to name is certainly looking at this. Car manufacturers, everything, right? But at the end of the day, it's consumer uptake, and this touches on a question for later, so we'll come back to it. But big trends, what's going to happen moving forward the next few years? Batteries, battery technology, moving through the lithium tech of the batteries. I'm no specialist, but what goes into these batteries, how these batteries are disposed of at the end of their life, how long is that life, are areas that need to be worked on, of course.
We have a question from Teresa. Teresa, do you want to be brave and ask your question by unmuting yourself? That would be fantastic. Thank you, Teresa.
Sure. So I just wanted to ask if you think this motivation to embrace sustainability is coming from a lot of European countries and China setting net zero targets, and if you think Malaysia will be setting a target like this anytime soon.
It's pull and push. So regulation, targets, government is one, certainly one aspect. I think the other aspect we're seeing is younger generations are much more aware, the power of the internet, peer pressure, much more knowledgeable than perhaps I was at the same age, like 30 years ago. We didn't have access to half the resources that one would have these days, and so a lot more informed decisions, which is possibly more valid at the moment than the government, the sort of the governmental legislation angle. There's people demanding change, and saying this can't happen. And we use, for instance, to give you an example, so there's Global Gap, there's things like Rainforest Alliance, there's a few of these global certifications, there's FSC Wood, Sustainable Wood, which are rock solid, internationally auditable certifications. There's the EIA, the Environmental Impact Assessment certification, which is global for those geographers or those sort of skills, mapping, ecological sort of research.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, so in general, like you seem quite optimistic that we'll be able to get out on the other side of the climate crisis. Are you, because I know a lot of people, when they talk about the climate crisis, they talk about it with like a sense of urgency that, you know, we need to be doing this, we need to be doing this, and they're quite negative. So are you taking kind of a positive perspective on it, that we're doing enough, and if we just continue with what we're doing, then we'll be all right?
I don't think we can ever do enough, right? I don't think that's possible. I'll give you an example. East Coast Malaysia this year, we had the biggest monsoon on record in living memory, an enormous amount of rain, floods, the farm was underwater. And then that's been followed up in February by 0 rain for now 5 weeks, right? So these swings in climate, these seasonal swings are quite tough to handle, right? But we're coping, you know, and I don't think we can ever do enough. But of course we're positive, because we are seeing positive, we're seeing real positive change. We can only change that little bit of the world that we can influence, right? You know, whether we're seeing it at UN or a World Food sort of side, I don't know. But in our little bit of the world, we're seeing it. We're seeing change. You know, we're seeing the little kiddies putting their plastic bottles in the recycling, right? Which in the countryside's a real achievement, because they used to just lob it in the ditch. I'm not sure that quite answers your question, but I am very positive. I really am. Yeah.
Yeah, it does answer. Thank you.
Right, should we go to another question? I'm not sure I can answer this one. What are the most valuable skills you learnt at uni? I think the most valuable skill, honestly, in this line of work is the ability to relate to people, to be able to talk to people. Because you find that you're talking to people of any culture, any age, right? And you're moving from sort of you know, you're treating equally people that are working on the farm and then the head of the state government, right? And you can meet them in the same day. So I think the ability to relate and to understand and to get on with people is actually really probably the most important thing that I learned at uni, and have learned since and continue to learn since. So, you know, whilst my Bahasa is not very good, at least I'll give it a go, which, you know, I think is appreciated. In terms of subject, okay, you know, ag science, agronomy for me, of course it helps. I'm a farmer, but I don't think that really matters in the world of sustainability, to be honest. It's more of a, it's a bit of a vocation, actually, if you know what I mean. You have to believe in it, otherwise you'd never do it. What inspired me to be part of the sustainability sector? Well, I've always been a farmer. I was brought up on farms. And I think farmers in general care for the animals and care for the climate and recognize that they shouldn't be doing damage. I think maybe people go astray now and again because they get led down maybe the chemical path or this path or the other path. But, you know, in general, I think farmers globally appreciate their natural environment. And so nothing inspired me. I was sort of born into it, I guess, you know. I think it depends on how, you know, it's a bit of a glass half full, half empty question, right? You know, you could say, oh, you're born in the countryside, poor farmers, you know, don't like that. But I couldn't really think of living in a city. So it depends. One of the questions I asked in the sort of the pre-work was, it's important for you guys to think about what area and what places in the world you might want to end up, right? Because work in the city is very different from work in the countryside, and different for different people, you know, but opportunities in both for sure. Yeah. Geography, yes. Whoever asked that, of course. Geography is a massive part of sustainability. One of the biggest, and this goes beyond farming, one of the biggest issues for global development is the issue of land ownership and land titles and mapping. And it's many, it's a very complicated subject, but I'll give you an example. When land gets passed down through the generations, it has tended in the past to go to the children, the heirs equally. And so farms get smaller, right? And they become farms or water resources or whatever it may be. Resources in general get split up. And then they become more difficult to manage, right? Because then you have squabbles amongst the people. Then we also have situations where people have died and the land title hasn't changed. So how do you deal with that land, right? And then we have situations where someone has a title awarded to them, but haven't perhaps done, and I'm not just talking about Malaysia, this is a global issue. The land has been used for the wrong purpose. So what do? Do you take it off them? Or how do you do it? So there's and in this way, the legal profession also plays a big part in sustainability in many countries in the world. So this is not really a subject specific matter. This is, I think, probably every subject has an angle of sustainability. So language students, we all have to relate to the people, right? Do you see what I mean? And in speaking the language, you can understand the culture. Or no, you can better understand the culture, right? So I think all subjects have an angle into sustainability. But certainly, yeah, geography, you know, the ecology side of the business is desperate for people. You know, you could probably get a job in your first year of university without too much drama, to be honest. Our biggest problem, as an aside, our biggest problem is recruiting people. Everything else we can do, but finding people that want to work in the rural area, doing rural development, pays pretty good, but they don't want to do it. Or they come and they say, I don't have a village grocer, so I can't do this, right? And so it's our biggest problem. Or they come and they say, I just want to work in the office. What's the fun in working in the office when you're in this beautiful countryside, right? We have a client in the US in Baltimore, and our farm in Trengganu was about 2 kilometers from the beach. So this morning I'm sitting there with the palm trees and the sea in the background, and they're in Baltimore shivering away in the snow. And what could be better, right? How can life be worse than that? How can it be any better? Sorry. There's a lot to be said for living in the rural areas, but anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. What else have we got? Small ways to contribute, right? The kids in the countryside putting the plastic in the recycling. They're doing their little bit to change the world, right? And I think that's superb. So, habit stuff, if we can get into a habit of recycling or using less is good, or repurposing. Us farmers repurpose everything, right? You learn if you live in the middle of nowhere that you can't buy much, so you better use what you've got. And so we become masters of making things up and welding things. And yeah, okay, it may look a bit of a mess, but it works, right? So, what you may think are really small, insignificant things actually make a huge difference, right? If you've got stuff at home that you don't want, you know, go and give it to someone. Don't throw it away, right? You know, go and give it to some people that are less fortunate. And then the other one I would seriously urge, is to go to the farmers market rather than your supermarkets, because, you know, one thing here is that agrochemicals are expensive, right? And our farmers can't afford, right? So Bukit Damansara, where I live, has a farmers market every Saturday. By the mosque at 8:30, if anyone wants to know. They don't have the funds to get organic certification, right? There's no way they could get organic certification. But it's organic farming because they can't afford the chemicals, right? And so you're getting fresher goods that taste better, right? That haven't had any chemicals on them simply because of the economics, right? And at the same time, you're directly putting money into the pocket of the farmers, right? And so these are all very accessible things that people can do. Rather than me talk about, you know, lobby this and go and do that and sign this petition and all that type of stuff. Actually, I think real life, what we consider to be almost insignificant, actually can make a big difference. Teach people, teach junior kids, you know, and then we pass it down. And I think, and in a way, you know, it's perhaps a more simpler life. It's probably a little bit less stressful because you're not worried so much about the material things, because you're just reusing stuff you've already got. And haven't we learnt to do that in the last year? You know, we've all been cooped up at home, and I'm sure there's been various frustrations, but there's also been various projects, and we haven't been able to go to the shops, right? Seems like we've all survived okay so far, you know. I'll be honest, I quite like doing business meetings in my t-shirt rather than having to put a shirt and a tie on. Anyway, is this okay? Do I think that the sustainable sector is finally getting traction due to the growing awareness of climate change? Well, no, I don't, because we've been aware of climate change for quite a long time. You know, if the farm is, let's say, 4 kilometers long, we've been having rain at one end of the farm and not at the other for years and years already, right? So this is not a new phenomenon for those in the business. Of course, awareness helps, but I think for those in the business, we've known about this a long time already, you know, maybe 20 years already. We're having to become sustainable in a lot of cases to survive, right? So you know, I would argue the question is the sustainability sector finally gaining some traction? It's not the case. The sustainability industry is absolutely booming, right? This has been around years and years and years, you know, probably 30 years that I know of, right? It maybe looks like it's gaining traction from your guys' view, but from within our view, it's pretty much the only thing we talk about, to be honest, these days, and for a long time. There was a question there, I think, Ruth.
Yeah, it's another one from Teresa. Teresa, do you want to ask the question?
Sure, yeah. So just going back to what you mentioned about reusing and trying to use less and giving away rather than just throwing them away and buying new things. How do you think we can balance this with economic growth? Because obviously if we're not buying as many things, then that kind of stagnates growth. And do you think this is even possible, or do we need to think about things in a different way?
Okay, so a good example. Let's use recycling as an example, right? So if you look at official numbers, Malaysia has, well, last time I looked, which is a while ago, actually formally quite a low recycling rate, right? But informally, because people come round at night and take stuff away from your bins, Malaysia probably has one of the best recycling rates in the world, right? And that person who takes it away from the bins, whilst many would think it's a dirty job, it's actually income, right? So in that respect, everybody wins, if you know what I mean. You know, one would think that, for instance, I can't really talk about Malaysia because I don't know, but in the UK, you effectively pay for your rubbish to be taken away, right? But your rubbish can make energy. It can be recycled or waste to energy projects. That's one of the areas we'll come on to later where we're going to see a whole sea change in technology. If they're making money out of your rubbish, why shouldn't they pay you to take it away? Right? And it's coming. You know, these sort of things are coming. So I think you're quite right, Teresa. We need to start looking at this in a different way, right? So we'll conceptually change the way we think about used up items, right? And will, if you, I think even, you know, many items of clothing are already, like Timberland shoes, are already using a high proportion of recycled material in their product, which as long as there's a question about greenwashing later, as long as it's certified, becomes a selling point and helps you to sell more, right? So I think the two can go together. It just requires a little bit of a change in thinking. We just got to think it through a little bit better, if you know what I mean. Yeah. But, you know, one thing's for sure, we have finite resources, so we better learn to use them a little bit better than we are. Does that help? Did that answer the question? I'm not sure it did, but
Yeah.
I think they do go together. It's not an exclusive equation, this one. But it's perhaps not quite how we've been thinking for the last however many generations, if you know what I mean. Oh, here, you know, what skills would be complementary? I think we've answered that. You name them. You know, I think any. I can't really think of a subject that couldn't have some sort of angle on sustainability, because if you know, sustainability also includes rural development. So here we're into sort of doctors and nurses and things like that. Teachers, of course, teachers play a huge role, because that's really how we're going to win this game. It's all about education, right? And we're all learning to be teachers in a way, because you know, I've got to try and explain this to the countryside people, to the villagers, and to our staff, right? And I can't just tell them to do stuff anymore. That doesn't work. So they have to be. It has to be explained and taught, right? So, you know, I said it in the sort of the preamble, the sort of pre-thing. I think the secret is you have to love what you do, right? You have to wake up in the morning and get out of bed and actually want to do what you're going to do, right? And I think as long as you are doing that, whichever subject that may be, if you can then angle it towards one of the many aspects of sustainability and sustained growth, sustained economics, recycling, food, you know, whatever, water, power, transport. Yeah. But you have to pick. I honestly believe you have to pick a subject that you love, because otherwise you're going to struggle. a lot, because you just don't want to do it, right? I know maybe that's a little bit too controversial. Are careers related to renewable energy going to grow in the next couple of years? Yeah, for sure. Renewable energy, you know, electric batteries are one thing, but please remember that the power still comes from the same place at the moment, right? So we're not looking at moving away from oil and gas anytime soon, right? We're not moving away from plastics anytime soon. That's not going to happen, and probably shouldn't happen. Some of the big drinks people now are starting to look at paper packaging. But then the issue with that, if you look at things like Tetra Pak, some of the, what do you call it, the coatings aren't recyclable, so it renders the whole lot recyclable. So renewable energy, you know, there's some very cool stuff coming around the corner. A lot of it can relate to engineering, of course. Some of it relates to agriculture, some of it relates to water. You know, we've never really managed to harness tidal. I think the 7 estuary projects, I'm not sure what the status is now, but last I heard, they ripped all the turbines out at the seabed. We've certainly not got as far as harnessing the ocean, you know, like the mid-Atlantic drift. And we probably don't know enough of its potential effect to even think about it at the moment. But if you really want endless power, you head towards the sea. So, you know, here would be marine biology. You know, everybody thinks marine biology is sustainable because of the barrier reef, right? But it's also because of sustainable energy, you see. Battery technology, that's going to be very cool. Some of the stuff coming forward, looking 10 years ahead, is quite incredible. We've got to think through as an industry better what goes into these batteries, where it comes from, and how we dispose of these batteries, as I said earlier, right? It's not quite as simple as we all think. And yeah, electric cars are glorious, but have a think of where the power's, you're still using the power, right? That's still coming from the power station, you know. Renewable energy, we're gonna see more on. We need to do a little bit better on using agricultural waste to a better effect. You know, there's still, even though burning is banned pretty much globally, farmers still burn the crop, which is stupid because they're basically burning money. They just don't, again, education, they don't realize. Yeah, renewable energy, you know, and the specific mention to solar in the question, you know, solar is not the same industry year after year. You know, they have sea changes in technology and cost of production. You know, they move generations in a year. So, you know, maybe a house solar project at the moment, I don't know, maybe it takes 15 years to pay back. I think in a couple of years, that'll be down to about 5 years, the way the technology is moving. And also the coatings. So okay, here's one for chemists, chemical engineering, the coating technology that stops the need to clean solar panels, right? And further enhances them is very cool. I don't know much about it, but my business partner does. Hector, he knows quite a lot about that. What have we got now? Oh, love this one. I don't know how much people know about greenwashing, right? So greenwashing is basically, I don't know what the Wikipedia definition is, but it's fooling people into thinking that you are something different than you're not, right? We are green, So you buy our products, but you actually not. Now, you know, I think you're going to get this in any industry. We know what's genuine. I think if you look out for things like USDA organic certification or UK, Europe organic certification, any genuine form of certification, you're pretty much okay, right? But just because they say organic on the pack, you know, if they've got no backup or you can't find any reference on the internet to their certification, I suspect it's probably not. Do you know what I mean? Is it affecting progress? No, not in the slightest. You know, the genuine industry is full steam ahead. As we've touched on, it's economic reasons, it's environmental reasons, it's staying alive reasons. You know, this is a living industry. It's not greenwashing is not affecting our progress, because those of us that are in the industry are doing it anyway, if you know what I mean.
Had a question come through from a student. Do you think conservation agriculture and methods of increasing soil carbon are viable ways to combat climate change on a large scale? It's an interesting one for you, Simon.
It is, you know, and coincidentally, we were talking about wildlife corridors on the farm yesterday. And we do quite a lot of work with the wildlife department, state wildlife department anyway. Soil carbon, biochar, understanding more about root architecture and plant architecture. And I think we've got more to go. I think some of this knowledge is still perhaps wrapped up in maybe academia, but absolutely for sure. You know, if we don't, this is what I was saying right at the start about how nature taught us to do the drains differently, right? The only thing we have on the farm, right? If we have no soil, we have no farm, right? And you know, if we don't conserve and promote that soil, we're doomed. We're absolutely doomed. And I don't think anything, if it's being poured a load of chemicals on, is going to survive very well, right? So one of the best measures of a healthy soil is dig down. If there's earthworms, it's healthy. If it's no earthworms, it's not so healthy. So that's a pretty simple measure, right? You see us doing it all the time. You just see if there's any earthworms, or see if there's any roots, anything living in the soil, right? And then you can go and do all the soil tests and everything else, but it pretty much tells you what you can see already. You know, there's a whole. We're pretty good at being able to say that which is above ground, and you know, photosynthesis rates and carbon dioxide and all this. We're pretty good at that. We can debate why some plants are included and some are not, which can get very controversial actually. But we're pretty aware. Maybe it's because we can see it, right? But I'm not sure we're as aware of the roots. And so some of our tropical grasses can have roots almost as tall. The roots are as deep, almost as tall as the grass, right? And they form huge mats under the surface, which in turn has a massive impact on reducing soil erosion and the wash away of fertilizer and soil, you know, in our tropical rain. Here we come back to the question about precision agriculture. So we have a farm, and we've got farm management software. We have automated weather station. We have remote sensing of soil moisture. We can do disease levels by drone or satellites, and we can pinpoint, or we will be able to pinpoint areas where we have, for instance, an insect problem. Sorry, that was my dog. You know, one of the simplest ways of treating an insect is go with a power washer and spray them off, right? And they get a bit wet and then they go somewhere else. And if we know that those plants, that group of plants, has a problem, we don't have to treat the whole field, right? We can just go with a power washer and a bit of fairy liquid, washing up liquid in the tank, give them a bit of a squirt, they get a bit irritated, go somewhere else, don't like us anymore, everybody's happy, right? Very, very simple stuff, but that's how farming tech is bringing a whole sea change to our industry. I no longer, I explained earlier, our biggest problem was recruiting people, right? But I no longer need to recruit farmers. I can recruit the lad from the local village who likes playing video games, because all of a sudden he becomes the drone pilot, right? And I think, I can't remember how many I've smashed now. I think I've smashed at least 3, right? Because I can't work out whether it's going forwards or backwards. But this little lad can go forwards and backwards and wherever you like, 2 kilometers away without being able to see the thing, right? He knows nothing about agriculture, but he knows quite a lot about playing video games, you see? So what it's doing for the industry, it's opening out our skill sets that we can, you know, people can come into the industry and they don't have to be farmers anymore. They don't have to do a dirty job. We need less foreign labor. You know, Malaysians or it's the same situation in the UK, isn't it? The British people don't want to do the dirty jobs, right? So we're upskilling the jobs. We're using tech to upskill the jobs. So there's more jobs that people are prepared to do, right? And therefore we're capturing different people in the community that wouldn't normally dream of coming to work on a farm, you know. I don't quite know how it works, but you know, there's these couple that sit by the computer and tap away at the farm management system, and it pretty much tells us anything we want to know. Whereas, you know, before we would have had to have gone half an hour in the truck to go and find out what was going on. Now it tells me, you know, if my irrigation pipe's leaking, it tells me exactly where it's leaking. And what, again, you know, to benefit from a disaster is, you know, is a bit rubbish, but it's brought the trends that were going to happen in 10 years' time. It's brought them now, right? Because to keep up, we've had to respond. To keep up with the supply chain, we've had to change. And so what the COVID effect has done is bring forward what was going to happen in 10 years' time anyway, which is good for me because I get to see it before I sort of retire, which won't be quite yet. But you know, I'm loving it because I'm in the thick of it. So I have to learn how to fly a drone, which is yeah, it's not going very well. Anyway, so well, the final question I've got written down. Wow, you know, so the next trends, the potential growth sectors, what's exciting? I think you've probably guessed I find it all exciting. What to watch out for? Farming tech, agricultural technology, the Internet of Things is going to be enormous. There's going to be whole new companies spring up around this. I think that also knocks onto the other aspects of any industry, really. It'll also help rural development because, you know, I was talking to Ruth earlier, you know, one of the issues we have in the countryside is kids don't have laptops. So when we all work from home, they can't because they don't have an option, right? So we'll be able to, as tech becomes more accessible, we'll be able to sort of assist. We got to be careful because we're not responsible for the education sector, but we'll be able to assist the education sector in their quest for teaching the rural kids. Yeah, but all we can do is assist. We're not leading that, right? But one thing we can do is we can share our weather data to the local farmers online via WhatsApp, so they don't put their fertilizer on just before it's about to rain. And I think it's probably something like 60 or 70% of the world's fertilizer actually does just go straight down the drain, which if you think about it, it's a bit of a waste, right? And I think that leads on to one of the really important points that I need to mention is we can actually feed the world, right? We can, but we need to just be a little bit more clever about it. So we need not to throw food away, right? And we need to not need a perfectly round tomato, because actually the wonky fruit, let's call it, the wonky veg, actually tastes better. And we need to sort of, I think as the generations are moving forward, we're getting this now, right? It's not the supermarket prepackaged culture anymore. It's buy it in a brown paper bag, or preferably in a reusable bag, right? But if we do that, and then on the other side, we can save 70% of the world's fertilizer, I think we might be doing a bit better, without having to change into, let's say, genetic modification, GMO, right? Which is currently not allowed. And I'm not going to get into that debate whether it should be allowed or not. But if we can't feed the world, we're going to have to do something. Otherwise, people are going to die. I can't remember now. Aren't we about 9 billion in what, 10 years' time? I think we got 30% population rise in the next 10 years or something. So unless something is done, we're not going to be able to catch up, because we're not chopping down any more forests, right? We may head, as don't want to keep you guys too long, really interesting growth. And now this, and the same line of thinking, insect protein, right? Growing maggots at 58% or whatever it is protein, for protein flour, currently used in dog food, animal food. Why couldn't it be used in human food? There are plenty of cultures in the world that eat insects, and I'm not a campaigner for avoiding meat, because I'm a farmer, right? Most farmers eat meat, but it's a very, very cheap, valuable way of producing protein. I'll give you an example. Malaysia is about 20% or something, 20 to 30% self-sufficient in protein. So we import, 60, 70%, 80% of our protein, right? When grow a few insects, let's have some insect flour. The only thing holding that back is people's mindset. We don't like maggots, right? Same lines. Duckweed, right? Duckweed, for those of you that come from temperate climates, or even here, right? The weed that's on the top of the pond, that the ducks eat, that you don't think anything of. There's a whole growing industry in duckweed for protein, the global seaweed industry for downstream nutritional products, which is basically using the sea as a resource, but you're not harming the sea because you're actually growing the seaweed, right? Huge potential moving forward. We're starting to look at both of those now. It really sort of is the, you know, seaweed as a drink, seaweed as a fertilizer, I guess has been a, you know, seaweed as a food, ancient history in Japan, of course, but seaweed for downstream products, it's pretty exciting. You know, duckweed as protein, insect protein, around proven technology, easy to do, need to change the mindset. So these on the sort of the food sustainability side, I keep coming back to battery technology. I'll always come back to renewables. I think we'll get more we'll get a significant growth in the ecology sector, environmental impacts. We're already seeing that. The guys that I know that do that also can't recruit people. Desperate for people. You know, they're not you know, it's not, they're not doctors or engineers, right? So no one's been going into this industry for quite a long time. And it's booming because any farm now over 500 hectares by law, international law, thou shalt do an EIA, thou shalt have an environmental management plan, thou shalt look after the wildlife. You don't have a choice, even if you didn't want to, you have to, and you will get called out. You will get called out on social media, and you will get called out very quickly if you don't follow these, if you don't do the proper job, right? And then that leads us finally growth areas in this sector. Education, got to be maybe the biggest opportunity. Social media, you know, I know very little about what influencers do, but you know, anything helps, right? Any form of education has probably got to be the single biggest thing in the sustainability arena moving forward, and possibly one of the most exciting areas actually of the industry. What
Thanks
else?
so much, Simon. I think that is really fantastic, and hopefully those of you that hear, you've been really inspired by what Simon has shared with you and has answered all your questions. And as he's mentioned a few times, they're struggling to recruit. They need you, your generation, to fill those gaps, to take that forward, all the technologies and sustainability that Simon's mentioned. These are the areas that, you know, all of you can work in, and all of you can really make a difference to the global community. So hopefully you found this a very inspiring talk, and no matter what subject you're interested in pursuing, there's always going to be that element of sustainability to it. We're going to let Simon go because it's 5 o'clock, but does anybody have any final questions that they would like to ask Simon before we end this session? Anybody have any final questions or comments?
Just to add, I'm quite happy to answer questions. Ruth has my email. We did this last year. You know, sometimes it's not as easy in a group, and people prefer to just send some questions via email. I'm quite happy to do that. You know, the more we advocate the business, the better it's going to be in the long run. So feel free, please. So.
I was going to ask Simon, do you offer internships? So if any of our students here wanted to do something with you for a few weeks over the summer, do you offer those kind of short-term placements? Have you done that before?
We are doing it, but we're doing it with the local.
Okay.
So people going into university, Malaya Trengganu, some of the local village guys and girls, because you know they're on our doorstep, and I think, you know, given the year has been a struggle for a lot of people, we've actually taken more than we should or we need, but I'm finding them all wonderfully difficult jobs to do, and taking great pleasure in doing it. But they'll learn, right? There's nobody doing PowerPoint presentations. But yeah, we do. But this year, I think we'll be focusing on the local area. something we could look at next year. Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic. So if you have no more questions or comments, please feel free to leave. And everything has been made of this session. If any of you would like to request a recording, I will pass along Simon. Thanks for coming, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.